Hello, coders, and welcome to another episode of The Coder Career with me, your host, Cameron Blackwood. Today, in a first from The Coder Career, I'm actually interviewing somebody who has co-invented a programming language. Today's guest is Matija Sosic. He is the co-founder of WaspLang, who create Wasp. Wasp is a really innovative approach to web applications, and I've been really enjoying checking it out. It's quite different to what you may have experienced before, so definitely recommend giving this one a listen and trying out Wasp afterwards. Matija joins me to discuss how he originally got into technology, his previous entrepreneurial ventures, and of course, why he decided to create a tool like Wasp. A quick plug for the local listeners of the Coder Career as well. We are hosting another event with X Design on the 10th of May. You can hear from myself, where I'll be giving a talk on Superbase and Vercel, and there will also be an excellent panel hosted by former guest Parul Singh. The panel will consist of former guest and former international rugby player Lee Jones, who transitioned to a career in technology, Louise Shambrook, who is one of the moderators of the Coder Careers Discord community, and is a previous social worker turned software engineer, and Alison Wood, who is a senior software engineer at XDesign, having transitioned into software engineering after a mathematics degree and some time spent working in travel and tourism. Tickets are free, but they are limited, so please make sure you do check the event link and sign up for the waiting list if they have run out, because we will be encouraging people to release tickets if they are no longer able to attend. Apologies for the long bit of housekeeping, but it's going to be a really great event, so I hope to see you all there. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Matija Sosic. Hi Matija, how you doing? Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey Ken, very nice to meet you. Thanks for the invite. And yeah, doing well. And I'm super excited to chat today with you about everything.
Likewise, because I think without giving the game away too much, this is the first time we have had someone on the show who has literally invented a programming language or any kind of like dev tool as the size of this. So this is very exciting. So who are you and what are you doing right now?
Yeah, sure. Super shortly about me. As you said, right now we are building a new dev tool. It is a programming language, although it's not something comparable to JavaScript or C++ or Java. So we are not trying to reinvent a new general programming language. It's more like, let's say, if you imagine something like SQL or Terraform, but for business logic of your web app. So basically, what we are doing with Wasp is that we are offering a simple configuration language. So you can imagine it as a high-level kind of file in which you specify the requirements of your app. Like I have a cron job, or I have auth with Gmail and LinkedIn, or I have my routes and similar. And then you plug in your own code in React and Node.js right now. So it's quite familiar to use it if you use the typical Perl or MERN stack. And then basically from all of that, in the end, we produce the full stack web application. So I would say functionally it feels like Rails-like full stack framework for building web apps.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked when I saw how much can just be generated from the command line when I first tried it last week. Actually, it was pretty impressive. I've never seen anything like that in the JavaScript ecosystem. It's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah.
So before you came to working on Wasp and everything like that, what's your original background? Obviously, you went the conventional route in terms of studying comp sci. Where did your inspiration come from, and how did you break into the world of technology?
Yeah. No, I'm coming from kind of traditional comp sci route, as you said. So it was here in Croatia. I think I say we because it's me and my twin brother. So we are kind of partners in crime in all the projects pretty much. So I will be mentioning Martin a lot here as well. So yeah, we are both kind of, I think in high school, we first, started doing programming because it was like a class in high school. We were doing some algorithmic competitions and similar. And that kind of naturally led us to studying computer science. So finished both bachelor's and master's here in Croatia. And I think kind of in the last year of the university, we started playing, with first ideas, kind of side projects. We were building some apps, like typical, SASs. Angular was hot back there. So exploring that. But I would say our inspiration for Wasp came actually, from building multiple, big apps, typical sales dashboard applications over a couple of years. So as I said, first we started just with kind of pure PHP and build a CMS in it, and it was like jQuery on the front end. Then we moved to Angular, Java on the back end, Backbone on the front end, and finally landed with React and Node, which was kind of again the new thing like 6-7 years ago. But kind of the gist of all these experiences was that we felt that every couple of years we need to relearn the whole stack just to build the same thing all over again. And it kind of felt, oh, now I know Angular, but I have to drop this knowledge and I have to learn React because now that's popular. And there's like a bunch of new ways I have to adopt and figure out what are the best practices around it and similar. So it just felt like, like we are reinventing stuff all over again. While, the requirements of your app are kind of looking from the outside, they're very similar. It's always like, you have authentication, you have users, then you have some dashboards with resources you are managing. It all kind of sounded very similar to what you have done, 5 years ago as well. So I think our main motivation was, there should be at some point kind of some abstraction layer, which will basically let you describe your application. Hey, I want auth with Google and LinkedIn, and that's going to be enough. Like, you don't have to figure out what specifically to do in React or Angular or something else. Like, that's going to be enough to make it work. So I think, that was kind of the first spark we got, into why we should start Wasp.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. It always comes back to one of my favorite rules is the Pareto law of 20% of your work gets you 80% of results. And if you can somehow have a tool that will do the rest of the work for you, that 80% that's very intensive, laborious, and then you can focus on that additional 20% value add that's unique to the solution you're working on. It makes a lot of sense. And I often find that I've been through that recently with a project I've been working on but on the back end, where I started using Superbase, if you've come across that before. And I found that incredibly useful for the back end side of things. And it's interesting. It seems like there's more and more solutions where we're starting to abstract stuff, which I think is promising because I find, and feel free to disagree, but I find developers often don't think like entrepreneurs, where we try and rebuild the same thing every time when actually we don't leverage stuff that's at our disposal. So I think this is it's a very exciting innovation.
Yeah, true. I think in one hand, it's nothing new. Like, we had frameworks 20 years ago. So I think, people have been building frameworks and backend as services for a while. But there is always there is always like another wave of technology which kind of, makes one step ahead of the frameworks you have right now. And then again, you have to figure out the new framework or the new, backend as a service to cover all the latest use cases. Either is it like a Postgres as technology, you want to use that instead of Firebase, for example, or is it, like this modern kind of, you want to use RPC between client and the server, and, just use the modern auth libraries and similar. I think there is always kind of this competition between, just technology going forward and basically frameworks and abstractions catching up on top of them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I haven't actually, it's only been recently in my career that I've been able to sit back and actually consider that, because now I'm at the point where I'm like trying to get up to senior engineer in my day job and all the rest of it. And instead of panicking, just trying to make sure that I understand everything, now I'm trying to think more about the wider ecosystem, and it goes very deep. And the more you think about it, the more interesting the problem actually gets. So it's a huge area, and I definitely encourage people earlier in their career that are listening to this to not be afraid of thinking about how the wider ecosystem works and what you can learn from it. It's really good to level up that way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think dev tools are like one area which, there is never enough innovation, because as you're saying, it's so wide and, everything is advancing so quickly. There is like always new opportunities opening. Like a couple of years ago, there wasn't GraphQL, there wasn't React Query, there wasn't something. So whenever something new comes, kind of introduces some new concepts. And again, but there are also new problems. So there are like always new ways to figure out like how to use them in the best way. So yeah, I think even that we have a lot of tools right now, I think there is a space for a lot more tools. And I mean, also on the other hand, what you're saying, being a developer and kind of trying to catch up on everything, I agree that's hard. I think it's very hard, for a developer to try out all the possible solutions before actually choosing one. Like, it's impossible. Like, you're not going to try 10 frameworks, before choosing something probably. So yeah, I think it comes a lot, to kind of hearing from others what's good, what works, what's modern, doing some of your own investigation. But yeah, no, it's a kind of fast moving world. But on the other hand, like a lot of stuff are actually still the same as we had them, I don't know, like 10 years ago.
Yeah. And many principles obviously stay the same as well. Like
exactly.
People always. This is the interesting question I get actually from a lot of people that aren't programmers or even involved in technology. they know the term programming language, and they expect it to be like, if I, they're like, oh, okay, so you do JavaScript. But if you were to learn Python, it's like you have to learn absolutely everything again, is the way people think, because it's like they think of it in terms of natural languages. Like if I was to learn French, German, Croatian, Chinese, if it was every single you want, but actually the principles always stay the same. Like a loop is a loop. A deployment process is a deployment process. Like the principles stay the same. So it's learning the one. That's the important thing, learning something first. And I think that's definitely a lesson that I've learned probably far too late. So again, something I'd pass on to listeners is just actually the principles will always remain the same. And an advantage you can have as a junior is you can pick up a new tool like Wasp and teach it to the senior developers at your company to give them a value add, which I think it's a nifty trick actually to advance your career, is learn the new stuff and teach it to the senior devs.
True, 100%. Because sometimes, being a senior dev, kind of, you had enough of new technology. You just want stuff that works, which is, battle tested and proven. Although, I mean, there is also exception. Like a lot of senior developers are even using Wasp, and kind of, they just want to use it for side projects. But yeah, I think junior developers are kind of those, they're often kind of very vocal, spending time, just learning, sharing what they learn. So I think there is like especially good, user base for kind of adoption of new technologies. It's also something that we noticed.
Yeah. And the something I wanted to ask as well was, you've had a history of being an entrepreneur before this as well. You've had multiple software startups. Was this basically where the inspiration for Wasp came from? Or was it that you wanted to be able to quickly build useful products and then, like I said, do that 20% on top?
I think it was both. Like on one hand, so we had a couple of projects before. I would say like one before this was actually like, like officially a startup. Like we had customers doing stuff and similar. So that previous project was actually like, like a typical SaaS tool. It was like a SaaS for public speakers, and basically it was offering them an easy way to collect kind of emails from people in the audience. So it was like a simple way to make a landing page specifically for your presentation, your talk, and in the end you will share like a special link which somebody could visit from the audience, leave their email, and get your goodies like presentation, I don't know, like discounts, extra courses, or similar. So that was like very exciting for us in sense, making something that somebody is using and having users. It was like amazing feeling that we haven't really felt before, just being on the developer side, disconnected from users, from people who are using your product. So we loved that. But on the other side, it was really hard for us to develop a product which was not for us as users. Obviously we were not public speakers, so it was like it was hard to have this feedback loop, kind of seeing what makes sense for them. You have to interview a lot of public speakers, observe them, and then integrate that back into the product. But that is hard when everything is online, and the public speakers are around the world, and you have no way basically into following them and seeing what they do with your product. So for us, still it was super fun, but in the end, it proved the market that we were into was quite small, so it couldn't really grow to like something that's going to be like huge and venture backed. So we decided that we love the idea of building a product, but we would love to build something which is more interesting to us as users. So this is how we then ended up in DevTools, which I feel is now a perfect blend for our interests.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool, and I agree with your point on how it's much easier to build in a market that you understand. Like I'd be the same. I wouldn't know where to start with public speaking. Like my main side project at the moment is building a platform to connect university graduates with startup opportunities, which I think we actually talked about over Twitter the other day. And
Yeah.
it's, for me, I understand the market because I used to be a technical recruiter before I learned to code myself. And that was in fact the inspiration. Basically, I got sick of recruiting people that were making more money than me and having more fun than me.
Yeah.
So I decided to learn to code. And I thought my first job out of university was basically in a high growth startup. And I learned so much in that 2 years, and compared to a lot of people who I knew who were working for maybe the big banks or the big consultancies. So I thought there's no clear path for students to be connected with jobs. So that's where I figured, oh, okay, I can leverage my previous experience. I know how the recruitment process works. So the advice I always give to people is just try and solve some problem that you've encountered in your workplace.
Yeah, exactly. No, I couldn't agree more with that. That would also be my number one advice, for anybody who wants to kind of get into something like this. yeah, just solving your own problems and being your own user is super valuable, because your feedback loop is short circuited. Like, you are your own user, and you can just dog food and try out everything
Yeah.
yourself. There is of course a risk of you being kind of not objective enough and kind of just falling in love with your product, but it's kind of another possible pitfall. But no, just being a developer, developing a dev tool that you would like to use, that's super useful. But I would say also, on the other hand, if you're a developer who has domain expertise in something else, that can be like incredibly powerful combination. Because like all developers have expertise in developer domain. But for example, if you are, I don't know, like you like beers, or you're like, you are playing with chemistry or something, that can be like a really cool combination, because you have unique insight into, I don't know, like chemistry or hardware problems, but you're also able to develop the solution for the problem. So
Yeah.
I saw that like many times, and that can also work incredibly well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's something that's worth highlighting as well, because I always think learning to code is the ultimate entrepreneurship hack. Like, 'cause you don't have to. Most profitable startups are software based, at least to a degree, these days, and therefore we don't have to pay anything to some agency or to some contractor, or to hire a CTO to build an MVP. And then if you know how to code, but then you have some kind of experience either as a consumer, or as you say, like an enthusiast, or a previous career, if you learned to code later in life, then the opportunity is unbelievable, because your potential competitors, chances are they don't know how to code. So it's such it's a bit of a pun, but it's such a life hack, really, to know how to code if you want to be an entrepreneur.
It is. It is. I agree. Or you even pairing up with somebody who is expert in, I don't know, recruiting, or like some other field, that can also be great. If your friends are, for example, crazy about weightlifting or something, and you want to make a weightlifting app, that can be like ideal combination of like partners or co-founders for your startup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest way to understand is like to respect other people's jobs a lot more, is to launch your own project and startup. Because I was actually reading, I forget the guy's name who invented Ruby on Rails, the
The
Danish
DHH,
guy.
yeah,
Yeah,
David Hasselman was the name. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's his name. Yeah, I was reading his website this morning, actually, to try and like get a bit inspired for some content ideas.
Mm.
And he had a great quote called "Easy is a job is a word that people use to describe other people's jobs," which I think was really cool. And it's something that you can pick up from starting your own businesses.
Yeah, yeah.
Is you'll be able to get the respect for every other job there is. And whilst it's great to attempt it yourself, it can be really good to get a co-founder who, say, is an expert in something like marketing, which I
Yeah.
think before I started trying to build independent projects, I had no idea how complex marketing was. It's crazy.
True, true. No, I also, I always thought like, marketing is easy, like development is the hardest part. Like anybody can do marketing, right? But then when we ended up spending like 90% of our time, just doing marketing, cold emailing, sales, basically, that's kind of, you see how hard it is, and you start appreciating development much more, in sense like, oh, that's so fulfilling. That's the easy part. That's the fun part. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a question, sort of switching the topic slightly back to Wasp itself. I was reading some of the documentation around how you actually go through the process of building it, and I can't even imagine a gargantuan task like building a developer tool. So it's very cool. But I noticed it was written in Haskell. Am I right in thinking that? That's a really interesting
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, and I mean there is a story behind this. I'm happy to share.
Mhm.
How we decided on it. So I mean, it all started with us learning Haskell in the university. So there was like one special course, like only course in functional programming,
Mhm.
and we took it. We were interested into it, and it was really interesting. Like we used Java before, C++, I think mostly. So like like really heavily object oriented programming languages, and I think Python a bit also. But yeah, like Haskell was, it seemed so elegant, and the whole functional paradigm was like, like it was, yes, it is a bit like mathematical, and we were always a bit more into theory, like we liked that part. So that was also intriguing to us. But on the other hand, yeah, it was just like, very elegant to use, like, and everything was, kind of looks like a formula. So there is no like, like those off by one errors, or like, oh, I forgot something here. It's much more kind of concise and looks more kind of like a logical expressions, for example, right? So that was, just kind of why we became interested into it. But then again, after finishing the course, it was really hard to find application for it. because like most of the companies are kind of JavaScript or developing apps or similar. So it wasn't like you could easily stamp on the Haskell project. So we actually mostly kept working on web applications, as I mentioned. It was funnily enough, because we never identified as like, oh no, I'm just a web developer. Like we were always more like I'm a general developer. I like algorithms, machine learning, and I know we were actually doing a lot of work in bioinformatics, for example, which was fun. But again, funnily enough, whatever project or job we picked up, in the end, we had to build a web app. Because like whatever you do, like algorithm, pipeline, the workflow, data stuff, in the end you have to deliver it to the end user, and typically it was like smaller companies or startups. So we also always had to build up the client, the web client for the end user. And again, it took it was the hardest part of the whole project regularly. Like we built algorithms and all the stuff, machine learning and everything. But then again, we spent like 80% of our time on figuring out how to build a web app, authentication, I know, like CRUD and similar. So I think that was a big part, why we felt okay, like this is really hard compared to the rest of the things we are doing, and we feel there should be some improvement or advancement here. But yeah, sorry, I digressed. To the point of Haskell, we kind of waited until the right opportunity, and when Wasp idea came through, Haskell felt like a really good tool for the job, because as you said, we were building a programming language, sort of, which comes with its own compiler, and Haskell is kind of known best as a tool for writing compilers. Because it has kind of these high-level constructs, which makes that really easy, and it has a lot of libraries for parsing and generating stuff in the code. So it was like like a really good fit. I would say again, like it's not the only solution that you can use. You could use C++ or Rust or even Java or Scala, but this was just kind of the right combination of what we liked and wanted to use. Plus, it was objectively a good tool for the job.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think something that's often lost in the conversation as well is what do you actually like using? As you just mentioned, it's so important because if you're not going to enjoy working on something, then you're not going to produce your best work. Like I love React personally, so I'm going to use it on the front end versus something like Angular, which I struggled through. But other people give me the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. Because in the end, I think there is no right answer. Like for any project, there is at least two technologies, if not more, that could be like equally justified to be used. So yeah, I think just you having fun is a big factor, especially in the beginning, because sometimes having fun is all that is left. That you have right now. When even maybe if it doesn't look like your product is taking off, or like that you're going to have any users, still if you're having fun, you are more likely to keep working on it until you reach that point where you actually also start getting outside interest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, probably two of the biggest sub-segments of people to listen to the show are people that are like actually learning to code right now because they're a career changer, or they're in the process of launching a product. So that advice really applies to both of them. Where, in the sense of you got to keep it fun if you're launching product, because sometimes you will hit the sort of, I think they call it the valley of hopelessness. And then if you're learning to code, I think it's similar. You hit this valley of hopelessness. And I actually spoke to a guy who, I won't name him obviously, but he messaged me on LinkedIn today saying like, I don't know you, you don't know me, but I saw you're a coder from a non-traditional background. I've been teaching myself for 6 months and I feel kind of hopeless now at this point. Like, what should I do next? And I said to him similarly, like, just remember to keep it fun. Like, work on something that genuinely makes you smile, that you enjoy. It can be a fun project. It doesn't have to be the next Instagram or TikTok. Keep it fun, and it's one of the best ways to keep the motivation, because particularly obviously in entrepreneurship it's key to keep consistent, but for learning to code and landing that job, the consistency of studying and working through is key. And if you're keeping it fun, you're keeping it consistent, or the other way around.
No, true. No, I completely agree, and I think you really hit the right point of kind of having fun. I think also another thing is just learning, because I mean learning is fun in the end, right? When you feel you are learning, you're actually having fun. So I think for us it was also like it didn't start as a kind of startup or like like a fully blown project. It was just, hey, like this sounds like an interesting idea. Plus we always wanted to use Haskell for something. So like let's try it. We are going to get better at Haskell, learn it. Plus we are going to test this hypothesis we have. Like, is it possible to make like configuration language for building web apps? So we always, like, whatever was happening on the outside, which was nothing in the beginning, right? We always had those two components: learning Haskell plus having fun with, like a new tool for building web apps. And basically, it was always fun. We were learning and we were curious to see what's going to end up, from all the stuff that we are doing. So I think that's something super important to keep in mind, because once it gets hard with either you're learning how to code a new language or just making your project, if there is that one component which is not dependent on the outside world, that's the thing which is going to keep you going in your efforts.
Yeah, and I think what your point about how this is something we just want to do is so important, especially in the dev tool world. Like, I think so many cool developer tool products came out of people saying, "Wouldn't it be cool if we could do this?
Yeah.
I want to give this a go." And so what if nothing comes of it? Let's just give it a go. I think that's awesome and such a good approach to have, and that's how great products start, I think.
True. No, I think it is the correct mindset. If you start from the beginning, it has to be huge, and if it's not huge from the beginning, I'm just going to quit. Then it's not going probably to work out, because there are so many snakes you're going to hit. But if you just start with the mindset, like, this is just my side project, and I'm just curious to see what's going to come out of this, then you're going to have a lot of fun at first, and whatever happens next, it's going to be like a bonus on top. So it's not something that that is given. I think the same was for us. I was just super curious, like, what's going to happen if I frame this as a language? What's going to happen if we add this part for authentication? Like, what if we add our own CLI for this, for example, right? So I'm still curious. Like, I still have like a bunch of at least 10 things I'm curious about, to see what's going to happen. So that's really, I think, the gist of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine that first time you entered the CLI command, the like npx. Is it generate wasp or start wasp? And it actually like generates. That must have been a crazy feeling, like kind of it's alive kind of moment. I must imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and in terms of Haskell, actually, I have a curiosity around that. Would you recommend the average developer to learn Haskell, and why or why not?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think just like the just learning a new language is already super beneficial. And like, probably you're going to start with the JavaScript or Python. Those are, I would say, the most popular languages, kind of, which are widely used right now. So that's a good choice. But then again, probably you're going to progress to TypeScript if you're professionally working on like web apps or similar. It's probably going to you're going to end up in that setting. And then I think, especially once you kind of dabbled in types, like, you use TypeScript and you see, oh, types are nice. I see how beneficial that was. I can have so much safety right now, and everything is breaking less. I think then also, if you try Haskell, you're going to have a lot of fun. So I mean, I would definitely say yes, because Haskell is kind of mind bending at first. Although people often say it's hard, and like you have to be academic to learn it, but that's actually it's not true. I would just say there is a bit of that aura around the language, because it's not so super widely used, and it's not that popular. But actually, once you get into it, it's a pretty huge community. Like, there is people using it in production, people using it for their projects, and there is like always somebody who's going to help you. Like, there are companies behind different libraries which are basically maintaining them actively. So there is a big community which is always, and they are especially willing to help, because everybody's kind of so condensed. Like, you are always going to meet the actual author of the library. Like, oh, here's the guy, and he is going to answer your question. So like the feeling is super nice. Everybody is friendly, and kind of everybody knows each other. So I would say that learning Haskell is super valuable just for the sake of kind of expanding your horizons, and seeing actually how powerful and useful types can be in your programming journey. And on the other side, when you learn it, you probably get a lot of let's say new ideas or where you could use it. No, I think it often goes like, first you don't have an idea, but once you learn a new tool or a new language, then you get like a whole new category of ideas, or for what that will be a good fit.
Yeah, and I think something that is unique about it as well, if I'm correct in my remembering, that is that it's functional, right? Which is very different to the majority mainstream ones that people will learn. So it's a whole new approach to actually writing code, which I think could be a really good experience. I mean, personally, I haven't really done much functional programming, but I think it would be good to learn from that side of things.
Yeah, no, that too. Although I would say in the last couple of years, with kind of new Python and JavaScript versions, I think everybody is now doing much more functional stuff than before. If you use like map or filter in JavaScript or Python, basically you are doing functional programming. So like a lot of these kind of lambda expressions, for example, all of that is kind of coming from languages like Haskell, and now is becoming mainstream to other languages. So I think like using Haskell now versus maybe 10 years ago, it's going to be like, like 80% more familiar. So it's not going to be that daunting at all. It is just, that it is a bit different kind of, let's say, you don't have those typical objects if you're going with, traditional OOP, like object-oriented programming. So there is a bit of a difference, but it's all still quite natural. So I would say in the end it's functional, but 80% of the functional stuff you have probably already experienced in your other language.
Yeah, especially if you learned to code relatively recently, I think as
Yeah.
well. Like someone called React a pseudo-functional language to me the other day, which I kind of it's like I kind of see that like it's clearly heavily inspired, and as you say, a lot of those maps and filters and how all the components themselves are functions. It makes a lot of sense, like because it's very different from early React, which was the whole
Yeah,
class-based style of
exactly.
things. And you ended up going through YC, right? So what was that process like?
Oh yeah, YC was fun and also super useful in many ways. So yeah, I mean we applied. So we applied 3 times for YC, and obviously got in on the third attempt. So yeah, I'm happy to share the story behind that. So I mean, we knew about YC from before, with our previous startup, kind of also actually even applied previously with the last startup, but didn't get in. But then when we started working on Wasp, I kind of knew, from all of their content and stuff, and we found all the stuff they were sharing super useful, especially about talking to users, doing customer interviews. Basically, I would recommend that kind of content to everybody who is starting a new project and wants to interact with the people who are about to use it. So I knew actually that it is good to apply early to Y Combinator, even if you don't have a product yet, or just in the super early stage and similar. So, and it's good for multiple reasons. So even if you don't get in, it's super useful to fill out the application. So the application is like like a pretty big document asking like what's your idea, why you are building it, are there any competitors, how are you going to make money. So all these questions are pretty good to make you think about like all these questions. So more you think about them in advance, more it's going to shape everything you are doing in the future in the right direction. So that is just a good experience, filling it out and starting thinking about those questions in your mind. And on the other hand, it's good to kind of, let's say, get on YC's radar early, because if you know, I guess he is kind of famous by now, but YC interviews take only 10 minutes each time. And it sounds a bit crazy, like how can they judge the company in only 10 minutes? That's impossible. They're just randomizing who gets in. But the fact is actually that application by itself already has a lot of information on you. From your demo, your site, your traction. So pretty much every let's say standard data is already in, so they can do a lot of crunching, either like by machine or by person. And in the end, conversation is I think mostly for kind of ironing out the details. Like hey, some specific stuff to your like dev tool. How are you going to get users? How did you get them so far? And similar, and to meet the founders. I think it's still important, to meet the people, see how they are talking to you. Are they friendly? Are they, basically like people who are like excited about doing this and similar. But I think the biggest kind of thing is once you get your let's say first interview or just your first application, it's going to be in their database, and let's say you don't get in because you just started, but next time you apply, which is every 6 months, they will be able to compare your progress from before, I mean from now to your actual before like progress, right? So if they can see, oh, last time they had like 10 users and now they have 100 users, that's going to be a great signal for you to actually show that you have this momentum going up, right? It's not so much about absolute numbers. If you had like 99 and then 200, it's not so impressive as having 5 and then 100, right? So I think it's just good to continuously apply, refine your idea over time, and show how you are progressing. And that's going to capture YC's interest and eventually get you in, which is what happened for us in the end.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, how's the it's almost legendary at this point. What so YC is actually, I should have said before I asked for the listeners benefit. We were talking about Y Combinator, which is a legendary accelerator originally based out of Silicon Valley, although I think it's now a lot of it is remote now. So what was the experience of actually going through Y Combinator?
Mm. So there are multiple aspects of the whole program. So yeah, the program takes 3 months, and basically, the company gets in. You get assigned your group partners, which is basically kind of experts from YC, from Michael Seibel, founders of other companies, people who are kind of serving, working with the companies personally. And then in the end, like the final event of the program is called Demo Day, in which companies present their progress through the last 3 months, what they are doing, and get introduced to investors in order to raise their first round. If the time is right, if not, they can do it a bit later. But that's pretty much the gist of it. And during those 3 months, there's the education part, which YC connects you to other founders, for example, people from Airbnb or like other companies like Cruise or whoever went to the program earlier and has like a lot of knowledge to share. And also on the other hand, like they're just helping you kind of build. Although it's only 3 months, like with the right focus and with the right advice from your group partners, you can actually make a lot of progress toward your demo day goal. So everybody says like, hey, now we have this amount of users, or we have these features, and we want to have this in the next 3 months. And yeah, it's just amazing, how this kind of, you feel like the whole group of all the companies, of all the startups are working towards their goals. And it's very energizing and very motivating to be the part of that group. So a lot of work gets done during these 3 months.
Yeah, I can imagine it's. I mean, there's a reason why they call it an accelerator. So I can
Yeah,
imagine it's a
yeah.
really cool process. Definitely on the bucket list for me one day to try and get in there. Like
Yeah, yeah.
I've known a lot of people go through it, and they've all said, yeah, it's an awesome experience. Did you do it in California, or were you out in Croatia when you did it?
So that one was remote. It was the second one which was remote, and I think one or two also were remote. But now they are back. They are back in person.
Ah, okay, nice, cool,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. I mean, on one
And
hand, it was super handy because we didn't have to travel anywhere,
yeah,
so they kind of made it easy. But yeah, I mean, also it would be amazing to be able to attend in person, meet everybody, and yeah, everything.
yeah, I think it's every dev wants to kind of hang out in Silicon Valley for a while. I think
Yeah, yeah, no,
it's a
yeah,
very cool place to go.
yeah, no. The funny thing is, when we first applied, then it was still in person. So,
Mhm.
like we got flown for the interview because we got the interview and they flew us into San Francisco to Mountain View. So we got to take a picture with the Y Combinator sign. And and then we actually got in like a year later, we could still use the picture. And it looked as if we were there then.
So
So
they
yeah, it was
so
fun.
they fly you all the way out for a 10-minute interview.
Yes, if you get to the interview stage, they
Wow.
fly you all the way in. Pay all the expenses for trip, for accommodation. Yeah, it's a bit crazy.
That is crazy. 'Cause that must be a what, like a 12-hour flight at least. That's mad.
It was a lot, yeah. From Europe, Croatia, it's yeah, exactly about like 12
Yeah.
hours. Like I think it was like 16, with all the layovers and everything. Yeah,
Yeah. But I guess after the application interview is done, then it's a holiday, right? So that's always a plus.
a bit like you're crushed from everything. You're like, I can't do it anymore. But at least you go around the city, have a bit of a holiday. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that is a nice part. But what I
Nice.
wanted to share, kind of, I think there is like one more part, YC, which is maybe not mentioned kind of directly, and which is super useful even after the program. So I think for us, like long term, that is actually the main value of the program is the community. So the community is simply amazing, and like for example, we are now building a dev tool, and there's like a bunch of successful dev tool companies which have been through
Mm.
YC, and like GitLab, for example. I mean, Supabase is also now there, and like Docker and similar. So it is just amazing, to be basically able to tap into that knowledge because there is like internal community. You can reach out to people, chat with them, get advice, and also even after the program, there is always like possibility to reach out, ask for advice, get testers, get people to chat with you. So I think just that sense of having so much knowledge concentrated in a single community is a huge kind of value add. Even after the program, like long time after.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's always good to kind of immerse yourself working with people that are also either already achieved the goals that you're looking to do, or in that process as well, because you just learn off each other, and That applies for not even just entrepreneurship, but coding as well. Like bringing it back to people that are learning right now to code, then the more you work with people that are either achieved that in terms of they've gone and got a job, or they're going through the process themselves, then the more likely it is you'll succeed.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the case. Because right now, only 3 months in, you don't have the problems you're going to have a year later. So just then you realize, oh, like those other guys actually did this, so I can ask them, what was the best way to handle this, and that's just incredibly helpful to always have somebody to lean on, ask questions, and learn.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts about hosting this podcast is the fact that I know that I'm hopefully helping people not make mistakes that I made in my career, and that's always nice, and a lot of people have done that for me. So this is a way of me kind of doing that to a lot of people at once, which is a nice, I think, a nice feeling for sure. And for the future, now that you're obviously very heavily invested in the in a developer tool and web development space, as invested as anyone can be, really. What do you see as the future of web development? Really, I mean, we're seeing a theme of rise of generative AI and a lot of improving developer tools with all kinds of cool stuff coming out. What do you see as the next sort of few years, and what can people get excited about, and what should people look for?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think obviously GPT is on everybody's mind. So
Yeah.
we have also, I mean, which is super exciting. I agree. We have actually been thinking a lot and kind of testing and kind of having fun with that lately. I actually wrote an article about kind of what is the future of programming going to look like. Like let's say like programming languages versus right now versus GPT. Are we going to even need programming languages? How are they going to evolve? So I can share the link maybe also after the call. It got quite popular on Hacker News, and I think it had like 200 plus comments. So like a lot of discussion emerged from that. But to kind of let's say, I think the gist of it is, and kind of my personal prediction is that both sides are going to keep evolving. So both libraries, frameworks, and programming languages, and also generative AI, GPT is going to be super helpful. I mean, why is that so? I mean, let's say, my assumption is, although now we have GPT who is really able to do some cool stuff, on the other hand, it's not really likely that we are going to be stuck with React 16 or 18 forever, right? So I think it's pretty safe to assume that both sides have to keep improving, and I think it's going to go in a way, because I mean it is the same as they have been improving so far. Like typically we use jQuery, it was fun, we loved it, but then we started noticing some things are repeating. Like for example, like managing state was really hard. Everything had to be done by callbacks. So we invented React. Great. And then again the same. Like we had with React we are repeating this, and then we invented frameworks. So I think every new tool is going to solve one set of problems, but with using it over the years, we are going to notice another set of patterns which we keep repeating. Like I was saying before, we keep repeating auth, we keep repeating like CRUD across the client and the server and similar, and then again we get new abstractions which are solving that. So I think this loop is going to keep going, and we just continue evolving into more abstract concepts. But on the other hand, GPT or just kind of let's say generative code generation is going to be super helpful in kind of bringing all this kind of stuff to your IDE super quickly. Before you had to look up documentation, figure out how to like do hooks in React or how to use Redux or similar. But now it's going to be right here when you start typing it, which is great. But then again, once you have used Redux or used Query for 100 times, maybe somebody is going to implement like new keyword in the language, which is going to solve your problem. So that's going to become part of the language, but something else is going to become a pattern which is going to be filled in for you by GPT, Copilot X, or Copilot AI, whatever it is. So I think we are going to see this constant interplay between auto-completion and like IDE helpers, and again frameworks, libraries, and languages evolving to capture those patterns as they become mature enough to be captured into a library or language.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the only thing that's really starting to worry me about Chat GPT in particular is how often it's confidently incorrect. The other day, I'm barely using Stack Overflow anymore. I'm using ChatGPT a lot, and I do sometimes have to double check things because it invented an npm package that just didn't
Yeah,
exist, and I was just like, how's it? Like, surely it could just check this via the npm directory and see if it's there. It was like. I said, this is the problem I'm having. And normally it works great. And then it was just like, oh, that's easy. Just install this package. And I was like, I've
true.
never heard of that. Looked at the thing, just didn't exist. It just made up. It was like npmi in whatever this thing
Yeah,
was. I couldn't believe it. It's bizarre, that
it is.
experience.
It is. No, I had the same. I was just the other day, I was using Tailwind and my gradients didn't work for some reason. And I was like, ChatGPT, what's going on? It was, just install this plugin gradient. You just have to use Tailwind gradient plugin. And that was great, but then turned out it doesn't exist. So, yeah, obviously, I think it often kind of comes up with, like convenient plugins, packages, even like, CLI command flags, like, this flag would solve everything, but it doesn't exist. So, I mean, obviously that's kind of, an issue with generative AI, which kind of, hallucinations and not being able to kind of, just being too confident in what it says. And I know a lot of people were kind of worried, especially at first, oh, is this going to take my job? Like, what are developers even going to do? And, is this AGI, what's going to happen? But I think, like there is like a big difference between AGI, which is actually somebody who can replace humans, and and what we are seeing right now, which is basically like super nice and super smart auto completion. I mean, of course, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and if they're going to come up with AGI. But kind of my general advice to people, which some was like, thank you so much, was that until like real AGI comes, which can actually be somebody who can literally replace your coworker, or like hey, somebody who can continually work on a task, figure out the problems, ask people around, feel the problems. I think that's something which is super hard to replace, because in the end it has to be a human which has some intention continually. Like if I said to ChatGPT to keep working on Wasp, that will be very hard, because like 50% of the stuff we are doing have not been solved ever yet. So just being able to pattern match to that is impossible. So I would say like we are good for now. It's going to become much easier for some developers and non-developers to get into programming, and we are going to become more productive, and documentation is coming closer to our fingertips in the IDE. But still, in the end, we need humans to kind of do this long-term thinking and just going after goals they have.
Yeah, I think broadly I agree with that, and that's why I quite like what the name of Copilot that GitHub have. I think it perfectly sums up how I feel about it. It will just be your Copilot for now, and if we do hit AGI, the way I see it, I'm kind of a nihilist in the sense of, well, if AGI happens, we're going to have to restructure the whole economic system anyway, so everyone's going to lose their jobs. So whatever, we'll see what happens. It'll either be really good or really awful. It'll be interesting, but it'll be one of the two.
True. No, AGI is like definitely a different set of problems. Like if we have AGI, like developer jobs are not the biggest issue we have to discuss.
Yeah.
Like it can replace any job, investors, I don't know, like anybody.
Exactly. And Sam Altman himself has said developers shouldn't be worried. So I hope he doesn't pull a sneaky on us and come out with something even better. But he said recently software engineers should not be worried. And I like the quote of ChatGPT won't take your job, but someone using it might, which I think is an interesting perspective of, as long as we embrace these tools, then that's the best way of going about it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, tooling is always helpful and we have to embrace it. But I think, in the end, still kind of I think, the big thing that people kind of often, it's easy to forget when you see, Copilot or GPT examples, which is like, oh, amazing code generation. I say, give me a form with X and Y and I get it. But the other big thing is that whatever code is generated, you have to maintain it later.
Very true.
And that's much harder than generating code. Although, okay, Copilot X is also like he'll be able to reason something and something, but in the end, maintenance is a much harder problem, because sometimes it's not just adding another button. It's like choosing a different library, like setting it up with outside API, having design decisions and everything. And again, maybe Copilot can be assist with some advice in here, but that's like a much more team effort. You have to know all the technologies. You have to be able to assume what's coming in the future. So I think we are still far away from completely outsourcing that part. And in the end, whatever code is generated, you have to understand it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to alter it and maintain it in the future.
Exactly, that's a really important point, and it's so rare as a software engineer day to day that you open up a new file in the IDE and it's completely blank, and you're just writing everything brand new. Like the vast majority of tickets and almost any job is some kind of maintenance, upgrading something, or detangling some knockout JS, which as a junior developer who had been spoiled with React, trying to understand what's going on there. Oh, those were dark times.
Yeah, true. It's also why it's important that we keep evolving things on the language side, right, and library side. I mean, imagine there was no React, and your GPT was just generating everything in jQuery. Like it's perfect code, everything works as you say, but it's jQuery. And once you get that code and you have to maintain it later, that's really not something that you want to do.
Yeah,
So,
that's a really good point. I'd never even thought about that, but yeah, exactly. It seems it will always remain in state at that point. And actually, if there's better tooling that comes out, then it's going to be not as efficient anymore.
because
it's only
in
as
the
good
end,
as the information we feed it.
exactly, because in the end, you want the least amount of code as possible to have in your code base, because less code you have, it's easier to maintain and reason about it. So as tools evolve, they will actually introduce those abstractions, and again, we will want the GPT to use those abstractions. So that's kind of, I think, super important. It was fun, like we actually used WASP with GPT, and it worked amazingly well. Because WASP kind of core part, the configuration part is super. I mean, it reads like a nice JSON. Like, hey, I have my auth with LinkedIn and Gmail. I have some queries. I have some actions, mutations. So GPT was actually, we just gave it, although it didn't actually learn from WASP before because it wasn't out there yet, or there were just a couple of examples. But it was able to deduce stuff super quickly, and we were impressed. Like it was able to create a new app based on the previous one, and like even generate some of the actions, mutations, and similar. So I think that kind of there are going to be more and more languages and frameworks which are kind of let's say designed for GPT. Because GPT can learn much easier from high level stuff, because everything is kind of more condensed and the logic is kind of more human readable. So I think in the future that's what we are going to see. GPT is going to have an easier time, and we are going to have easier time with more high-level solutions.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good point. And for people who want to find out more about WASP, because I truly mean it, and not just because you've come on the podcast, I found it a really innovative experience, and really enjoy using it so far, and I'm going to definitely use it some more. If people want to find out more about WASP, what's the best way?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, the best way is to go to our website, so wasp-lang.dev, or you can just Google it, and it's going to come up.
It'll be in the podcast description as well.
Oh, it's going to be there. So I mean, all you have to do is just run one curl to install the package locally, and wasp start new app, and that's it. As you said, everything is open source. We are happy to accept contributions, and just today we launched our second launch week. So we rolled out a bunch of new features like auto-generated auth UI forms, running async jobs, defining custom API routes, and we also introduced templates for building typical SaaS with GPT integration. So that's something was being popular. So yeah, just a bunch of new tools, and we had a bunch of folks using it for their startups, side projects, internal tools. So yeah, feel free to try it out, and we'd love to see you in our Discord. Happy to answer any questions and connect there.
Yeah, I was going to say the Discord seems really friendly as well. I've been hanging out in there a bit myself. So, yeah, really, really cool. And if people want to keep in touch with you, is Twitter normally best?
Twitter is the best. I think, yeah, LinkedIn. But yeah, I think Twitter is kind of the main one these days.
Awesome, cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show today. It's been really cool to hear about your journey and about WASP as well. Do you have any parting WASP words of wisdom for the audience?
Yeah, keep buzzing. It's always how I know newsletters. No, but yeah, I just wanted to thank you once again, for having me here. It was really a pleasure to meet you, and yeah, thanks so much for the nice wishes. I wish you the same with your project, and just looking forward to staying connected in the future.
Likewise, sounds great. I will catch you soon, and thanks as well for the listeners for checking out another episode of The Coder Career.